right, guys. Well, welcome back to the show. Today's episode 61, and we have another very impressive guy to share with you guys today. I was just telling Eric, I don't know what's up with these pest control guys, but I swear to God, they're all really good looking. But I just want to say thanks for being to the show. I'm going to go over your resume real quick. It's super impressive, actually. A shock myself. I haven't done too much digging on you. We've talked in the past. I'll kind of go over that and how we met originally. And then I just want to say, thanks for being here, Eric. It's a pleasure and an honor for you to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Jonas. It's it's always awesome to jump into these different podcasts. A couple of years ago, I was not a big podcast guy. Didn't really listen to many podcasts, and I started, being a guest on a couple, and then I started doing my own podcast, and it's awesome, man. I love it now. Great way to share information, help other people, kind of up-level the industry. So glad to be here, dude.
That was the whole goal behind the whole podcast to begin with, was to up-level the entire industry as a whole.
Yeah.
And not just, pest control, but we do a lot of fertilization weed control on that side of the world too. So if a lot of the pest control guys that are watching this, they'll listen to this. A lot of them will know you. A lot of the lawn care guys, it'll probably be a really good introduction to those guys. So I'd say most of the listeners are a split between lawn, pests, some cleaning, some HVAC guys. So kind of all over the board. So we just talk about business in general and just kind of get to know each other. But I'm going to read your resume real quick, but it's super awesome. So you're owner, vice president of Natura Pest, right?
Yep.
Natura Pest?
Yeah, Natura Pest, you got it.
Right. Yeah, Natura Pest, cool. You studied law at Harvard University.
I did.
And then you studied psychology at UC Berkeley.
Yep.
And you're also a certified entomologist.
Yeah, associate certified entomologist, yep.
That's pretty awesome. So first question I'm going to ask you, Eric, is who were you in high school?
Who was I in high school?
Yeah, if you and I were, juniors in high school, who would you, and we're friends, who were you?
Okay, so interestingly enough, I'm not the biggest fan of the education system, and I wasn't the biggest fan of the education system through junior high, even maybe in elementary school and high school. But there were a couple of classes that I liked, loved science, loved health, but I played football, and I still play football. I play for a semi-professional league here in Idaho, and I'm actually the commissioner of that league.
Super cool.
And it's been wild. I played in high school, so you'd probably know me as the jock, kind of a quiet jock in high school. Hated math with a passion, and English was love-hate relationship. You know what I mean? And what's funny is that now in my professional life, I'm all about spreadsheets. I'm all about communication, so I'm big on English and math. And strategy and all these things I kind of hated in high school. So, I think the guy that I am, same kind of personality in high school. But you might look at the two guys now and think, how in the world did I get to where I am now based on what I was doing in high school?
Same. So I was same background. I hated math. I was a jock for sure. I was a wrestler. Played football as well.
Nice.
I went and played semi-pro after high school as well. So that was fun. So we had a lot of similarities there. Should have went to college to wrestle, but I decided I was going to stay behind for a girl. And that's just kind of how I got to where I'm at today, which all worked out in the end. So how do you go from not liking school, maybe it's as you're older, you're not really in the education system these days. But right out of high school, where do you go first? Do you go to Berkeley? Do you go to Harvard? And why did you pick those two routes?
So what's funny is that I think for me, school and education is all about what it's applicable to. So, when you're young and you're going to high school, going to junior high, the struggle there is that there are these education administrators that are telling you, this is what you need to know. You need to learn this. You need to sit down, read this book, go through this textbook, and you need to memorize all this information, and then we're going to test you on it. And at the time, I just couldn't help but sit there and ask, why? Why do I need to know this? What's it good for? What am I supposed to apply this to? And when you're 17, 18 years old, you have very little life experience to really apply any of that education to. And, as I went through my early adult years from maybe 18 to 20, 22, there was this big change where I get out of my parents' house. I moved to California, start selling pest control, and start realizing that there are all these different aspects of my life that I needed to improve on. And the psychology course from Berkeley was the first one that I took. So I went online and I wanted to find something that was different than typical college. That was kind of my first goal, because I was working full time. By the time I was 22, I had a special needs son. And I was also getting divorced at the time. So I had all this stuff going on, and I was like, okay, how do I go and get an education and learn about these things that I feel like are important to me now without completely just destroying my whole schedule? So I went online. Berkeley provided this fantastic psychology course through a platform called EDX, edx.org, and it provides a lot of high-level courses from beginner all the way to doctorate level. And so that was kind of my first journey there. So took courses through Berkeley for psychology. And then I think it was probably a couple of years before I started looking for some courses again. Every now and again, I get a little bit extra time and start getting that itch for learning again. And so I found that course from Harvard, and that was specific for contract law. And at the time, I was just getting into my business ownership phase where I had bought into equity with the pest control company. And there was customer agreements, there were operation agreements, there were all these different things that like kind of revolved around contracts. I remember reading these contracts and thinking, yeah, I wish I had more context into the clauses and all these different parts of the agreement and why they're there and how they're enforced, and what's applicable in my state, all these different laws. So went online, found the course from Harvard. It was taught by a phenomenal professor, of course, as you'd expect. And every time that I've taken a course like that, it's reinvigorated my desire for education, which is a completely turnaround. 180 from what I experienced in high school, right? In high school, it's, you have to learn this. We're going to force it down your throat and test you on it. And post high school, it was, I'm going to find the things that are important to me based on what I want to do with my life. And then I'm going to take specific courses to ensure that I get the right value, right? And so yeah, that's how I ended up going through Berkeley and Harvard. And I promise, it looks way more prestigious than it actually is. We're talking online courses. It is through those schools, and I highly recommend them. But it was a cool experience.
It's super awesome. And again, I probably have a similar story to that. Is all throughout my entire high school career, grade school, maybe when I was super young, I probably checked out books out of the library. But as I got older, high school, I promise you, I never took one book ever out of the high school ever. Because I didn't know what I liked to read, and I was all about fiction. My brain was all over the place. I was trying to figure out what I was good at, and just that weird time, right? Now I try and read, I typically read a book a week, but I just can't consume enough knowledge.
Yes.
I can't get enough. So I like the courses idea. That's actually pretty cool. So so if you're in college and I'm a recruiter, you're the exact profile type that I'm looking for. You fit the bill. You look like a sales guy. You're good looking. You're smart. You're that jock who's very competitive. I'm assuming that's how you got recruited into pest control sales. Cause I heard you mention that.
Well, it was funny, my brother-in-law, who's now my business partner, his name's Jake Klaus. He's also an associate certified entomologist. And when he married my sister, and this was back in 2006, I think, 2005, 2006, he had spent a couple of years selling pest control in California with a buddy of his. And when I graduated high school, I didn't know exactly what job I was going to have. And he's like, dude, Eric, you should come down to California and sell pest control. And I was like, I have no idea what that's even like. Who buys pest control? At the time in Idaho, door-to-door pest control wasn't really a big thing here
either. There still isn't, but it was weird.
And so he's like, you should go sell pest control. And I was like, okay, I guess, and I had never lived outside my house. I just graduated. The very next day after my graduation, hopped on a plane, flew to Bakersfield, California. And anybody listening who lives in Bakersfield, California, you're like, wow, that was a bad idea. And if you don't know what Bakersfield, California is, now you know. Don't do it. 3 out of 10, maybe on a good day. Just boiling lava hot. It was 115 degrees every single day. I went down there, sold pest control, probably hated every minute of it. One of the hardest things I'd ever done up to that point. But the amount of money that I was able to make for myself for the time that I worked was just crazy, And so it was a very interesting introduction into the pest control industry. And I'll straight up say that I was trash as my first year selling. I was not that good. I don't know how many accounts I sold. It was probably less than 100, but I still made $10,000+, as an 18-year-old kid. And then I came back to Idaho, and my brother-in-law was like, "Hey, dude, you gonna sell again?" And I was like, "Not a chance in the world. Like, no, never again. I'm done with pest control. I'm gonna do whatever else that doesn't involve selling pest control ever again." And he found this local company here in Boise, and he's like, "Dude, it's a totally different experience. You can just live where you sell, and it'll be great." And so that company was called Gemtech Pest Control in Boise, Idaho. And I jumped in and started selling for them for a couple of years. And it was kind of the golden handcuffs, right? I mean, once you see the opportunity and you feel it and you start trying to work another job, and you get, at the time, it was probably like $10 an hour, $12 an hour.
I just looked it up. It was $6.55 I just looked that up as you're talking. $6.55 in 2008, right?
Yeah, man. Like, it's minimum wage then. It was so horrible. And so I started selling pest control again, making good money. And then during that time of my life, I ended up getting married, and I needed a little bit more of a stable job. And so I went and worked for DirecTV. They had a big call center in Boise before the AT&T acquisition. Big call center. And so I started working for them and kind of segued through the sales department into the retention department, found my way into training and teaching and doing kind of this corporate training aspect and figuring out the management for call center aspect, which was really cool. And then right around 2011, the guys that owned Gemtech Pest Control reached out to me, and they said, "Hey, listen, we really want to do this inside sales thing." And I was like, "What the heck are you guys talking about?" And they're like, "Well, we're going to put a bunch of money into Google, and Google's going to run these ads for us. And then people are going to call in, and we need people who can, sell them over the phone." And I'm like, "Okay, so no door to door? Like, this sounds pretty awesome." And so I jumped in as kind of their first inside sales manager and helped them create the very first, at least for them, the first inside sales department. And then that's where I hung out for a few years, worked my way through that, became the director of sales. And then Rentokil came by and was like, "Hey, strategically, we would love to have an office in Boise, and you guys were the biggest local company. We'd love to acquire you." And so they kind of told all the managers, including me, and I was a little worried, kind of concerned at the time. But I met with the acquisition team from Rentokil, and they were awesome, very detailed, really cool. They purchased the company, and their national director of sales was like, "Hey, do you want to join Rentokil and kind of be the inside sales, like, regional manager for the Pacific Northwest?" And I was like, "I guess so, dude. Let's roll," right? So I kind of jumped onto that, and my brother-in-law, kind of coming big full circle here. That same brother-in-law that I had worked with at Gemtech Pest Control had since moved on, and he had moved over to Washington State. And in 2013, he started his own branch of Natura, right, from scratch. And my sister and him moved over there. And so from 2013 on, they were working on building that branch. And then in 2016, Rentokil acquired Gemtech, where I was working. I jumped on with the Rentokil team for about a year or two. And then in 2018, my brother-in-law was like, "Dude, you're flying all over the Pacific Northwest. We're in the Pacific Northwest. Why are you working for another pest control company? Why don't you come work for us?" Right? So I joined Natura as their director of sales, and kind of finally got back to work with my brother-in-law and my sister. And then from there, I started buying equity piece by piece. We had an opportunity to buy out a former business partner, and I jumped on that, sold some real estate that I had, bought into the company, and waited until the next business partner wanted out, jumped in, bought more equity. And so my pathway to business ownership has been kind of from the very beginning, frontline colleague, and then through a significant investment, which when I think about it, it's kind of painful, but still totally worth it. Significant investment into ownership. So there's a very long answer to your question.
I love it. But that brings me a few questions. So when the Rentokil deal happened, did Rentokil have a good call center built out, or did you basically build that for them as well? Or did they take it over? Did they change anything, or what was that like?
So Rentokil Rentokil has a really good acquisition model. And a lot of people, obviously, they know Rentokil from the Terminix acquisition and probably some other acquisitions around the country. But when they came in, they basically said, hey, look, we like what you're doing. The reason why we want to purchase your company is because you're very profitable. We don't want to change anything. We don't want to do anything that's going to change that profitability right off the bat. You guys just keep operating and we're good, right? In fact, they usually retain ownership or like the previous ownership for 6 to 12 months just to make sure that everything runs exactly the way that it was running before, right? And so they said, hey, you keep operating with your team the same way that you're doing now. And we kind of shared some pro tips back and forth. And then after that is when I kind of started taking over the inside sales options for their other offices around the Pacific Northwest. So
that was my next question, because then you said you started flying around.
Yep, they had an office in Anaheim, California, and there was already an inside sales manager that was kind of doing that section. And so I covered offices in Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And it was interesting to see from a big aspect, right? Like if I needed to roll anything out, something new or something different, because of the size of Rentokil at the time, new rollouts, new ideas, new initiatives took months to roll out. Whereas, with a smaller company, I was used to being able to just say, hey, I think we're going to change this. That sound good to you guys? Great, let's go, right? And so that was a little bit of a different thing. So to kind of answer your question, they did have a good call center aspect, but they struggled with being able to move quickly, right? And so I changed a few different things while I was there working for them, implemented some changes that I thought were key to success, which definitely helped while I was there, kind of helped them be a little bit more productive and successful. And then I think now they have likely probably taken most of their call center work down to California.
Gotcha. So they start Natura Pest 2013. You come in 2018 roughly, start buying up some equity. And then is that one branch at the time, right? Because it's their first branch there. Because you're in Boise, are you moving there? Did you work remotely?
This is where the logistics get kind of wild. So there at the time, and I actually forgot to mention this other branch, for a very small amount of time, we had a branch in Seattle, Washington. And so what I would do is, because my son lived here and I shared custody with my ex-wife, right, with his mom.
We were in the same exact spot.
Yeah, you got me, right?
I get it.
So for a week, I'd be in Boise, right? And then I would fly into the Portland airport, hang out in Vancouver, Washington, be with the team, right? And then come back to Boise. And I would do that every single week, all summer long, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I think I was averaging probably 50 to 60 flights a year. And it was, a 45-minute flight, so it's not that big a deal. But I always laughed when people are like, oh man, the work commute is so rough. And I'm like, dude, my work commute's like 300 miles. So I started doing that. And eventually we sold our office in Seattle. So there's a little bit less travel for us all, which was nice. And we just maintained the office right there in Vancouver, Washington, which is, logistically for anybody listening, if it's right across the Columbia River from Portland. So just kind of imagine the Portland area is where that office sits. But for the last, since I joined, since 2018, which will be 6 years coming up here soon, it's been every other week, consistently all summer long. And then in the winter and kind of the early spring, it's like 3 weeks in Boise and 1 week over in the Portland area. So
right on. Yeah, we live similar lives there too. Like I said, when I was young, probably 24, 25, I had my oldest daughter, shared custody. So it's like 1 week I'm gone, 1 week back home, 1 week I'm gone, 1 week back home. I mean, I have little kids now too, so they can come with me or whatever there. But yeah, we live similar lives there. But my branch is our biggest branch is 2.5 hours away, so I can just get in the car real quick and scoot down there. So it's not too bad. I'll stay there for a few days, a week, and then I come back home, which is super interesting. It's a very similar path there.
Yeah.
And so, like, you get hired on as a director of sales, director of marketing. did that first branch, both branches get set up by door to door? Is that how it all started? Because your brother-in-law was doing door to door. So like, I'm just going to go start my own company.
Yeah. So, luckily for me, my brother-in-law, Jake, he's really big into kind of being the visionary side, right? So, he sees a goal. He's very good at execution. He'll go out and kill it. And before he opened that Natura branch, when he was working for Gemtech Pest Control with me, he was doing 500 account summers, which at the time, I know that there are guys now that do 1,000, 1,500, just wild numbers, right? But at the time, 500 account summers were great. That's
still great.
Yeah, it's a six-figure commission year. That's pretty solid. So
yeah,
when he started Natura, he went out that fall. It was fall of 2013. He went out on his own and sold probably the first 150 customers, and sold and serviced all of it.
Been there, done that.
Yep. So you know how that route goes. And then the following year, 2014, he got a couple of guys, recruited a couple of dudes to come in and sell with him. They went out and sold, and within their first 12 months, that branch made it to, I think, $1 million worth of 12 months trailing revenue. So it was a huge incline, like a big steep curve growth wise for them. And then by the time that I got there, they had kind of multiple teams that were kind of operating already. So, I jumped in January 2018, and it was like right into the recruiting game. It was, traveling back and forth to Rexburg and Provo and all these different places around the Northwest, trying to pick up sales guys. Right.
Yep.
And I did a little bit of work at the time. We weren't as into digital marketing, but I did a little bit of work with that marketing partner at the time, just to make sure that we had some kind of lead flow coming in. But mostly it was just making sure that the door-to-door operation for the company was going to run smoothly.
Right on. Do they still do door-to-door, or do you guys shut that down? Are they still rolling it out?
We do door-to-door, but it's more of a unique way. So we offer a different type of commission program. So it's a pay-go program. We also bill monthly for our pest control service. And so usually what I'll tell guys is I prefer to find guys who are experienced, who want to have really good commissions, are willing to do a pay-go plan, probably live locally in the area, So we've kind of moved away from the type of door-to-door plan that is, it's like, I don't want to bring a whole gaggle of 21-year-old dudes and pay for the apartments and do all that stuff. That was a time in my life that I'm okay parting with, right? Like the cruises and the trips and the events and all that stuff was super fun. It was awesome, but and you guys know how it goes, right? Door-to-door programs like that are expensive, crazy expensive,
very expensive. Yeah, and especially when you're competing against some of the bigger name guys, like, and what they're paying is ridiculous. For us, it's a race to the bottom. We just can't keep up.
Yeah, man. You get some of these big, huge door-to-door companies. And what I would say, there are some legitimate pest control companies that use door-to-door as a growth method. And then I also think that there are marketing companies that also do pest control. You know what I mean? And their bread and butter is door-to-door sales, is recruiting, is putting on those events. And it's hard to compete with somebody who that's their main growth method. I probably don't have enough fingers or toes to count the number of reps that I warmed up to the idea, and they probably signed with us and then got snagged from us, from Aptiv, Hawks, Moxie, you name it, right? And that got pretty demoralizing pretty quick.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. How long do you think, maybe this is a bad question, but how long do you think you can do door to door without ruining your reputation? Or do you think you never really ruin your reputation?
Like as a company?
Yeah.
In a market? It kind of depends. And what I think is really important to understand is that these door-to-door guys that you get, in their mind, they're thinking, okay, dude, I just got to push as hard as I can for 3 months, 4 months of the year, right? And, I have to shake off everything. I can't let anything affect me emotionally, right? And so they kind of numb themselves to some of the interactions they have with customers, which is good and bad, right? It can be good in the fact that when they knock on someone's door and that person says, "Hey, you schmutz, go get a real job," or whatever, and they're like, "Thanks, guy, bye," and then they kind of move on. But there's a lot of guys who, especially because they're young, 21 years old, right? They can't help themselves but respond and react in some situations like that, where they'll put these customers, these people in these neighborhoods on the defense, right? And it just becomes a really bad scenario. So whenever we were recruiting, we put a really, really big emphasis on, hey, no matter what, whether you sell them or whether you don't, always leave on a good note, right? Someone answers a door and starts attacking you. Hey, super sorry, man. Didn't mean to bother you. That's my bad. I'll get out of your hair. You have a great day, right? See ya. Because like I've had lots of phone calls from people who are like, hey, your guy knocked on my door, no soliciting sign. You guys are a horrible company. And then I can talk that guy down, right? But if my sales guy gets in a fight with him, there's no talking that person off the ledge, right? Bad Google review, earned reputation. I mean, if I look at our Google My Business profile, right? We have over 2,000 reviews. It's a 4.9 rating average. It's phenomenal. And we've worked really hard to get it. Almost all of our 1-star reviews, and there's not a lot in there, but almost all of them are from when we did door-to-door sales, right? And so you have to make sure that there's an emphasis on showing guys in advance. You can't just say, hey, like, let me know if something bad happens. You have to say, hey, something bad will happen eventually. This is how you need to handle it, right? The same way that you teach objections, the same way that you show the door approach, you have to teach them, hey, when you run into somebody who's upset or mad, this is how I want you to handle it because it's my reputation. It might be 3-4 months of your life, your selling career, but those bad reviews, that reputation is going to follow me for hopefully decades as I build this company, right? So if you do it right, kind of answer your question, if you do it right, you can definitely maintain a good reputation. And if you leverage positive reviews and you're trying to do that on like the service side of the company, you can offset some bad reviews you get from door to door. But you cannot afford to have some guy who doesn't care about your reputation knocking doors for you.
Couldn't agree more. And same with us. The only time we ever got a bad review, when we get a bad review, it's all from the sales guys. And it's usually not even nothing like they didn't get into a fight. It was just they sold the account. Maybe they didn't relay some information to the technician or didn't explain the agreement. Like, it all.
Yep.
So that's usually where it comes from. So then this time, you're transitioning out of door to door a little bit, and then this is where they want you to stand up the call center. Can you walk us through what your process was? Maybe give us a key strategies with the call center.
Yeah. So the big thing when we were kind of transitioning out, we had a decent door team and we had a little bit of an office staff. And I was talking to my business partners, and they were like, hey, we really want to start putting more money into this digital marketing thing and see if we can start leveraging that because the cost per lead was significantly less, right? The acquisition cost for digital marketing is half or less than what you're going to pay for door to door. So
let's just say we're paying them $150 on the door, roughly.
Yeah.
Right? So if we can get it for $75, let's go all in on that.
Exactly. Right. So, the first thing that I implemented was a way to track the lead volume coming in. I said, hey, if we're going to figure out whether we're doing well or whether we're struggling, I need to know how many qualified leads are coming in. And if they're not qualified, I need to know why.
So did you have a CRM at this point?
So we did have a CRM. We used Field Routes, which we still do. But I actually built kind of my own sales CRM through Google Sheets, which I had actually done before at Rentokil. That was one of the things that I implemented there because at Rentokil, when the distance between marketing and the inside sales department was really far. So, the way that it worked over there was that they set sales goals, and then they would kind of divvy up the marketing money by different regions. And whether the marketing money actually matched up with the sales goal, it didn't matter, right? It was, you do the best you can with what you have. And so I started tracking the lead volume and the qualified leads and, what we were on pace to do and how much our spend was. And I started tracking all these different numbers because I got very bothered that they didn't pay attention to that correlation, right? So when they would come and they'd say, hey, we're not hitting our growth goals, I'd say, well, the team is performing up to standard from what you guys want. we're not getting the lead volume that we need in order to hit these goals. So if you guys want the revenue to be there, we need to make sure that we're backing it up with marketing spend. And they would just kind of say, okay, well, I'll see what I can do marketing wise. And I'm like, I guess we will, right? Like if the inside sales department is doing their part, but the marketing department isn't, then that's a problem. And so I took that philosophy over to Natura and I built out this tracking sheet. And that was one of the smartest things that I think we did on our pathway to success with our inside sales department was being able to track all the data, track your inside sales as far as leads coming in, track your closing rate, your conversion rate, contract values. And that's average initial plus average recurring, average one-time services. We tracked revenue per lead. We tracked auto bill pay percentage. We tracked where the leads are coming from, what the source was, all that stuff.
And now you have to have a good team to do all this as well.
Yes.
Even just tracking the little source button, like it's constantly training on that.
Yeah. And I was recently going over the onboarding process with my kind of the second in command in my sales team, because she's going to be doing some of the training for some new reps we have coming in. And I'm going through this onboarding process and I'm realizing how long it is, right? Because I used to do the onboarding and I'm like, hey, it's not a problem. We'll just go through the outline. And I'm reading through it and I'm like page after page after page of all these different things. And I'm like, that is a lot of stuff. But we do hold those reps to a very high standard. We pay well and we hold them to a high standard and we teach them a lot and make sure that they can do everything that we need them to in order to be successful. And that's kind of the culture that we've had since I started there. High expectations, high performance. We'll take care of you guys financially, but everything will be tracked. Your performance will be measured. And if you're underperforming, we'll make sure that we provide you the coaching and training that you need to be successful. And if you're cool with that dynamic, you will be successful. If you're coachable and you're disciplined enough to take what we're trying to teach you and implement it on the phone, I promise you'll be successful. But we've had to let a few people go because it's just not what they were looking for, right? So yeah, you do have to have a really good team. And that starts with making sure you have good candidates come through the pipeline when hiring and you pick the right candidate. So there's a whole system we have for that, which is super helpful.
You don't have to give me specific numbers, but do you like to see an inside sales team? Do you like to see commission-based guys? Do you like to see salary plus commission? What do you like to see on that side?
There's pros and cons. So I've done lots of different versions of this, and I've actually designed inside sales programs for other pest control companies that have done way different versions. So right off the bat, the easiest version that I've ever done is just straight hourly, which for a lot of guys listening, you might think, oh man, like who's going to do a sales position that's just hourly? You'd be surprised. You pay the right hourly rate, and you can make it work in your customer acquisition cost and in your profit margins. You can pay an hourly rate to a sales team and they'll do pretty well. The cool part is that there's a lot of camaraderie and they work together pretty well when commissions are on the line. So they'll help each other and close accounts for each other and kind of step in when they need to. And it's kind of nice because they're all getting paid the same hourly amount for the work that they do, right? I think the most beneficial for both the business owner and the salesman is probably a base pay plus commission, right? It's the most classic version of it. And we did a podcast episode on Bugbuxplus where I talked about some of the key differences. And that allows you to, pay them for the work that they're doing for the time they're putting in, right? So they kind of have a minimum amount that they can expect. But then the better that they do, the more that they sell, the higher they perform, the more commission they make. And that whole relationship is in my opinion, the best.
I agree with you 100%. So that's actually how you and I got connected. I don't even know if you remember, but I was just figuring out the whole pest control side of the world. Like I always did lawn care, COVID hit. We get shut down here in Michigan, can't work for 3 months, just came out of a late winter, long story. I started knocking doors in Wisconsin because it's a 2-hour drive. That's where pest control started in my life. And I'm like, okay, so I'm out here doing this pest control, doing the selling, doing the servicing, do all this. Then I was like, okay, well now we have a pile of leads from this last summer. Like, man, like I need to get this inside call center. So I just met Phil Reinhardt at the time.
Nice.
And then, so I reached out to Phil, like, hey, do you know anyone in this world? He's like, actually, I do. And he sent me Eric's information. And that's kind of how it all started. So we went back and forth the emails. I don't know if you remember this or not. And so that's kind of how we first met. So it's a pretty cool story there too.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had a lot of guys kind of reach out and ask me just like little tips and questions about, inside sales and pest control and stuff. And it's cool to see other people's journeys. You know what I mean? Because obviously I have my own, which I think is kind of wild enough. But sometimes I hear these journeys from guys just like yours, like you're saying right now. You have this situation through COVID, especially, which is a really difficult time for service companies, and you see an opportunity, you pivot, and you start reaching out. Right? I remember when I was kind of first in pest control, reaching out to other people in the industry and asking for their advice was not a thing. That's just not something that anybody did. And so I'm really glad that now that dynamic has changed. People feel like they can reach out and share quote unquote proprietary information and industry secrets, So
yeah, it was super, super insightful. And again, now fast forward a couple years later, we have multiple offices, we got a bunch of dudes, and it's been a fun journey. With that inside sales thing, I have two other questions. Do you guys keep your marketing in-house, or do you have a marketing company?
I've gone back and forth on this one. So we have had marketing in-house. In fact, I went from having an outside marketing partner to having an in-house marketing partner to having another outside marketing partner, and then transitioning again to another outside marketing partner. I mean, I think eventually possibly the best scenario that I can imagine is that you actually have an outside marketing partner where they have an entire team of people who specialize in delivering exactly what you're looking for, right? Like they specialize in GMB, they specialize in PPC, Yelp, Angie, anything that you could want to dabble in, they have experience in, and you didn't necessarily pay them to get it, right? You didn't pay them a full salary, you just pay them a cut of the spend, right? And then along those same lines, I think it makes sense to have some kind of director of marketing or inside kind of liaison role who helps to make sure that the vision and the communication between you and your outside marketing team is maintained, right? Because that's kind of been my role as I've been using these different marketing companies. Is I tell them kind of what I want, I hold them accountable, I create the kind of accountability system between us, but eventually I would love to have kind of an in-house person who can do that, because that person can really execute on some more intimate marketing options for you, right? Because as an owner, and you know how this goes, right? There's like 1,000 different marketing ideas I have bubbling around in my brain at any one time, and they're not necessarily the types of projects that I can hand to a third-party marketing team, but I could hand to an in-house marketing person.
And it's simple things like, I don't know if you're thinking the same line as I am, but you've set up a booth at the fairs,
exactly,
doing the 4th of July parade, just things like that to keep that person busy all year round. That can really move the needle and put yourself out there for the public to see.
Yeah, all these different what you might call like PR type stuff that you really need somebody in-house that's their main focus. And so, as a company, once you get to the point where you can allocate, and I don't know exactly what marketing positions go for nowadays, but it's probably something that's closer to the $50,000, $75,000 a year range full time. So once you have that kind of money to allocate, I think it'd be a huge step for anybody to bring an in-house person in. And then you still, you probably have, who knows, hundreds of thousands of dollars you're still spending with this third-party marketing partner. And that's fine. They have their place, right? But you get kind of the best of both worlds.
I agree. I love that strategy. And then as far as like the sales guys in-house, what's the minimum requirement that you'd like to see a inside sales guys hit in revenue? Hidden revenue,
or was it like the metrics?
Just either or is fine. What do you like to see?
Revenue wise, every year we sit down and as a team, we figure out kind of what our lead goal is, like our lead volume goal. So I'll sit down with a marketing company and I'll say, hey, you guys tell me what's possible, right? Regardless of my ad spend, if I gave you guys an unlimited budget, tell me what's possible. And they'll come back and they'll say, hey, we think that this is probably in the ballpark based on your previous experience, how well we feel like campaigns are doing, et cetera. This is what we feel the ballpark is. And I'll say, okay, what do we think is an accurate range for cost per qualified lead, right? What can we agree on? What range? And then we'll kind of come to terms with that, which from there, I can decide. I can say, okay, perfect. Well, based on the number of leads you think you can get me and the cost per lead you're estimating, now I get to decide how much of that I want, right? How much of that pie I want to go out and get. And so, if I had a goal that was 3,000 leads for an office, I could figure out my metrics. And through the metrics I have for my inside sales team, we have a formula that shows us what our revenue per lead goal is based on those metrics. And so if I know the number of leads I want and I know my revenue per goal, that instantly gives me my revenue goal for the year, which is kind of fun, makes it easy. And then if I had, whatever, 5 or 6 salespeople, 10 salespeople, doesn't matter the number. If they're all full time, I can divide that revenue goal, the inside sales revenue goal, between all of them. And that gives me a target range where I can say, okay, per person, realistically, we should probably shoot for this kind of range, right? I want these guys to be in that ballpark. And then if I know the phasing per month, which I should, if I'm building those lead projections out, that means I also know the sales revenue phasing per month, which means I can further divide that between the people who are selling. To be honest, though, I don't typically set goals based on revenue for the inside sales team. Instead, I set goals based on metrics. So if the metrics are healthy, the revenue takes care of itself, right? It's kind of letting them focus on what they have more direct influence over. Because worst case scenario, if the lead volume dies down, well, the revenue's not their fault, right? If the lead volume's not there. So we focus on making sure that the closing rate's good, conversion rate's good, auto pay percentage, average contract value, all that stuff. And if those things are going well, then we're usually in a good place.
I like that. You mentioned if they're full time. So I'm assuming you have, or other companies that you work with have some part-time people too. Like maybe they're stay-at-home moms or whatever that may look like. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, most of the reps that I have at Natura are full time. It's been interesting. One of the most recent new hires that we have has another family business that she works for. And so she was like, hey, I can work basically 3.5 days a week, maybe 4 days a week at the most. And she was a very good candidate. So, usually I wouldn't jump into that kind of a thing because training a person to get to the caliber that we need them to be requires full-time involvement for a couple of months before I feel like they're really to a place that they can hit the numbers we need. And so for her, being part-time was kind of a risk. But right now she's actually one of our best performers. So, still only working 3.5 to 4 days a week. She puts a lot of time and effort into what she does, and she's very coachable, and that worked out pretty well. For other offices that I've kind of worked with and consulted for, it kind of depends. Sometimes you can find people who work part-time and can be decent. But what I found is that the timeline just extends, right? The training timeline goes longer because they have less opportunities to learn from. And when they're trying to make improvements, the same thing applies, right? They have less opportunities to apply those improved lead measures. And so if somebody's struggling, it takes them that much longer to really do it. And so you don't see a lot of part-time inside sales people. But if you can, especially during the slower times of the year, if you have, say, a team of 4, right, that works full-time all summer long, if possible, if you can have them all kind of shift down to 32 hours a week or 30 hours a week during the slower part of the year, collectively, it's better for everybody as a team. Otherwise, you might end up having to lay off one person and keep a team of 3.
What are your thoughts around in office and remote working?
This is a great question because it's really tough. I've seen it work good and I've seen it not work. So there's a couple of offices that I've consulted for who have remote reps who kill it. They're just that type of personality. They work very well on their own. You don't really have to keep close eyes on them. They're very driven by performance and quality, and they handle the whole at work dynamic very well, or at home work dynamic very well. And And then I've seen other people who just really struggle, really have a tough time. I remember during COVID, there was a space of 2 weeks where we took our whole inside sales team and office team, and we said, hey, just to kind of prevent us from running into a situation where somebody gets COVID and then everybody gets COVID, let's just all go work from home. Let's be proactive. We're going to go work from home. We'll send you guys home with all the equipment that you need. Let me know if you have any technical problems with your internet, et cetera, et cetera. And they worked from home for about 2 weeks. And by the end of that 2 weeks, the difference in culture was like palpable. You could feel the shift where the communication was different because they're used to sitting kind of in the same room where they're just talking to each other. The communication's constant, right? And now the ability to kind of assume positive intent and to have clear communication from rep to rep, because again, they work on each other's stuff. They're very kind of intertwined and intermingled in everything that's going on. The communication suffered. And they actually asked, they're like, hey, when can we come back to the office? Like, can we please end this remote working thing and come back and be in the office again? So it was kind of a surprise to me because I thought that once we went virtual, it was going to be like this huge shift and everyone was going to be like, I'm never coming back to work, like I'm always want to stay home. But that's kind of how they wanted to do it. And now, we're actually about to test out remote team members from like different countries, like in Mexico.
Yeah, for like a CSR or for sales?
Both, if it works out.
Yeah,
right.
Same.
So
we're working on too.
Well, I'll keep you guys updated on that. It's something that's in the works, and so I can't tell you whether it's good or bad. But
so we have one that does all of our payroll.
Nice.
And man, it's been a huge win. So once it went so well, maybe we just got lucky, found Rosie her first time. She's really good. I had 2 people working on payroll one whole day, going through all the commissions and blah, blah, blah. It takes a lot of time. 2 of my highest paid people working on this. I'm like, let's just try this thing, paying this girl whatever we have to pay her, every 2 weeks. And that's all she does is strictly payroll. And it costs now just my girls review it real quick. Takes them about, half hour, 40 minutes to review, and they send it off. Huge win.
Yeah, man. I mean, anything that you can do to obviously get better productivity. Typically there's a pay advantage there too. And the whole remote working aspect, one thing that I think is just crucial, whether you have a team that works in the office or a team that works remotely, obviously you have to have a good management team, right?
Absolutely.
If you have a team that works remotely, that manager has to have a very good idea of what's going on when, so be able to, influence performance and provide good developments and have that leadership aspect that they kind of lose a part of by not being there in person, right? So
yeah,
I remember when I was doing the whole Rent-A-Kill thing and I was traveling from office to office. I mean, there was a team that I led remotely for 3 weeks out of the month. And we had to do a whole lot of interesting creative things to make sure that the dynamic was on par, lots of video calls, lots of chat, kind of being available when they need, lots of training, lots of developments.
For sure.
If somebody's wanting to go remote, and that's kind of a new thing that is kind of popular for now anyway, keep that in mind.
Yeah. So we had one of our office girls, she'll be having a kid soon. So she'll have maternity leave in a few weeks. We're like, okay, well, she's going to be coming back, but how do we fill that position? Maybe even just part-time. That's how the whole CSR from overseas kind of came about. So we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see. I have 2 follow-up questions too, though. So one was, slow month. So you figure December, January, February starts to pick back up with your sales team. Your weather's probably similar to ours. It gets cold, snow. How do you keep the revenue generated? What do your sales team typically do in the off season like this?
So one of the things that's a benefit for us, and this doesn't work for everybody, and there's pros and cons of this too, but we've used hybrid reps since I started at Natura. So instead of having individual sales teams, collections teams, retention, billing, customer service, et cetera, we have our reps do all of it, right? Which is nice, especially when it's slower, because when the leads slow down, they still have other projects that they're working on. Yep. So that helps tremendously with staffing. And since we phase out our leads and I kind of know in advance what to expect, that helps us kind of project our staffing going into the colder months of the year. So there are a few people on our staff who will go back to school for like a winter semester, right? And they'll even do some remote work while they're there if they want to. And then some people, like every season so far, I've had somebody who, is either struggling and we end up letting go, or they end up moving on to something different, or they get married and move away, or some kind of life thing happens, right? But in some seasons where staffing hasn't changed, what we typically like to do is reduce hours collectively across the group.
So you're saying it's like 30 hours?
Yeah, and just kind of agree. Because it's like, if you have a team of 5, right? And they're all working 40 hours a week. If collectively they can all agree to just reduce down to 32, you're effectively cutting out one full person, right? But all 5 of them are able to maintain. And if you kind of start off with that philosophy in the beginning, they usually do okay. But we've always approached it as, hey, here's an idea. If you're cool with it, great. It's kind of what's good for the one person is kind of be good for the whole team. But if anybody on the team is like, hey, I really can't do that, I would struggle a lot financially, we've never had a problem saying that's not a big deal. You go ahead and we'll kind of give you some hours.
That's cool. So then it brings me to like the next topic, like same topic, but like, how do you keep your sales guys motivated during the summer? Like, how it is, like maybe not so much. Let's stay away from the door-to-door guys. Let's just say like internally, like keeping those guys focused. What do you guys do anything out of the box for those guys as well?
I like to do, we like to do events every now and again, I think that monthly, obviously, and we have performance reviews weekly, and monthly and quarterly and annually. Once a month, I think it's fun to do something kind of outside the office, right? Do some kind of event, get together, go do lunch, go do dinner, go do something. Get out of the office and kind of get out of the dynamic of just being 100% performance driven, Once a quarter, I like to do an event that's a little bit bigger than that. Obviously, a little bit outside the office, same kind of aspect, just on a bigger scale. And we do company events a few different times a year. That's, company wide, but I like it when that department has a chance to kind of go do something fun, probably once a quarter. And then the other aspect of it is like we have leaderboards, and we track our performance. And what's nice about that is obviously it can get a little bit heavy when performance isn't going well. You have to sit down with somebody and say, hey, we really got to make improvements. This is what we need to work on, et cetera, et cetera. But what's also nice about it is that when people are doing a good job, I get to walk into that office and tell them how much of rock stars I think they are, and that constant kind of positive feedback loop, right? Like I come in and I'm like, hey, you're closing, you're killing it. You're one of our best closers, right? Well, that person's likely to grow in confidence and continue closing at a good rate. So, keeping people motivated, obviously you have to provide some type of outside dynamic, some work-life balance. But you also have to be very dedicated to providing positive feedback, not just constructive criticism, but a lot of positive feedback to people. Because if they're working hard to hit goals that you're trying to get them to, but they never get any positive reinforcement from you, then it gets old quick.
Yeah. What do you like to see their close rate at?
Closing is usually 70% on qualified leads. In my mind, that's kind of always been our standard. And I see teams anywhere between, the 60s to 65 through the 70s. I don't typically see teams that are higher than 70s. Like in the 80s, it gets a little bit crazy. I'm like, I don't know how long you can sustain that.
Raising prices or something.
Yeah, it's like this is kind of wild. But so 70% on closing is what I usually typically like to see. Conversion, which is just whether or not they're able to go from a typical one-time treatment to like recurring revenue. I like to see conversion at about 80%. That does depend on the type of business that you run and type of marketing that you have.
Whether that's bed bugs or if you do wildlife or something.
Exactly.
Like
if you have a bunch of commercial properties that end up buying a bunch of one-time inspections, which always tanks your conversion rate. But around 80% for my team. And then all the other metrics like auto pay, 95%. you got to be striving for something in the high 90s, because if you're not, you're just missing out. That's one of the easiest things you can hit on. And then your average contract values, that stuff all depends on what your service offering is. And you should definitely set whatever those goals are at the minimum amounts that you want to see, right? It's like, if you're not hitting what we need to hit our revenue goals, then you're not in the green, right? And then we have an overarching quality score, which is that revenue per lead that I was talking about before, which is just a combination of closing, conversion, average one time, average contract value, and average initial.
Cool. Are you guys mostly residential? Do you do some commercial?
We do some commercial, but I'd guess that our split is at least 95% residential and 5% commercial. Commercial, and obviously, some of the complicated details there, right? Most of the commercial that I say we would do is not what I would consider true commercial, right? So, when you get into the true commercials, it's like apartment complexes, audited accounts.
Yeah, exactly. So small mom and pop shops, retail centers, doctor's offices.
Yeah, the ones that you pretty much service like a residential account and you call it commercial,
Right.
But yeah, we do some of that. And we're thinking about building out more of our commercial division. When I was back at Gemtech, we had a bigger split of commercial versus residential. And the sales team that I ran there did a lot of commercial work. So totally different dynamic than residential. So if you guys are listening thinking, oh man, maybe it's a lot of the same, those circles don't overlap as much as you wish they did. But there is some opportunity there.
There sure is. There's a lot of opportunity there. And we're kind of phasing through that right now. And it's been super exciting. It's been going really well. We're testing out one market. If we can figure it out, which seems like we have been, we'll open up to the other markets as well. Where are you seeing most of your leads coming from right now? Probably a little bit everywhere, but where would you see like the most leads? Is it Google? Is it?
Realistically, Google for us is really good. And probably the reason for that is because we've spent a lot of time investing in Google. So like our Google My Business profile is really healthy. The review count's really healthy. We've had campaigns that have been running for a long time. So PPC works really well for us. So Google identifies our brand as a very relevant solution to search queries, right? Aside from that, Google LSA was pretty cool for a while until it kind of wasn't so shiny anymore and became kind of a standard thing. And other than that, referrals have been a big thing. In fact, it's funny. I know that a lot of companies out there will kind of wear that like a badge of honor, like, oh, we get most of our leads from referrals. And I'm like, that's way cool, but you really should be investing. Like I try to fight against having a high percentage of referrals. Like I would love to have a lot of referrals, but the more referrals I get, that just shows me the more opportunity I have to push digital marketing to get a better percentage elsewhere.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. With like you're talking about getting referrals, and I kind of switch topics real quick. I know we're running out of time, but like, as far as attrition goes, keeping clients on board, keeping them happy. Do you guys do anything there to help your client satisfaction and keeping attrition high?
Yeah. So there's a few different things that from the very beginning, we tell our technicians and our customer service reps and inside sales reps that account retention starts from the very beginning of the customer experience, right? That starts from, clearly going over all the contract details, making sure they know exactly what to expect, right? Because everybody has those customers who cancel within the first 3 months and they're like, this isn't what I expected. And you're like, oh, come on, right? So clear communication at the beginning is going to be huge, right? So making sure that you have a very clear sales process where you have all the information lined out for you to go over. So your inside sales team is really good and confident there. And then the communication from technicians when they go out and they explain what's going on with the customer. Being punctual on appointments, that's a huge one, right? Easy way to get a customer upset is when you're late and no shows and have to reschedule stuff. So punctuality is huge. And then throughout the year, we actually send like little touch points. So in the springtime, we'll send out this letter. We call it our loyalty letter, and it gets sent out as both postcards and emails. And it basically just says, hey, thank you so much for being one of our customers, right? Like, here's our vision, here's our mission and values, and this is what we've been able to do in the past year with what you've been spending for your pest control service, right? We show pictures of our service team. We show pictures of the ownership teams and their families. And we talk about the money that they're spending being able to provide opportunities and jobs for people that live locally, right? And it allows our customers to connect with our company on a more personal level, right? Where instead of saying, hey, I have a service, you have money, you want what I give, I want your money, let's have a transaction. It's, hey, I want you to be able to believe in our mission, in our values. And if you can believe in us as a company, then when things aren't going so well, instead of you thinking maybe I should cancel, they think, man, I should just call Eric. I should call him real quick and just let him know that I'm having kind of a tough time and see if he can fix it, right? So we do those touch points. We also send new customer letters. So right after they sign up, we send that same kind of letter to them. And it also kind of describes what licensing we have. It also provides a little section in it that says, hey, you're going to see some door-to-door sales guys throughout the year knocking on your door. They're going to tell you, at least try to tell you stuff about our company. I promise no one knows more about the service that you get and the offers that we provide better than we do. So if anybody throws anything out there, you have any doubts or concerns, call us.
Just call. Absolutely. Yeah. And let's be honest, these sales guys are good.
Well, it's funny. When I was drafting that letter, I was doing it in kind of like a way against the tactics that I would use on the doors.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the
100%.
And I used to tell people there are like 3 levels of difficulty when it comes to knocking doors and selling. If I knock on someone's door and they say, oh yeah, I have a pest control company. And I'm like, oh, who is it? And they're like, I'm not really sure, but I know I have one. I'm like, okay, dude, this is in the bag, right? You're telling me you pay for a service, you don't even know the name. I'm about to switch you over, right? The second level of difficulty is when they know their company, right? It means they have some kind of loyalty. They connect with them a little bit, but still, dude, I'm probably going to switch you over. The third level of difficulty is when they mention like their technician by name, or they mention like the company owner by name, or there's like a personal connection, right? And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I were to knock on someone's door, what tactics would work the best against me, right? And that's where we ended up coming up with this customer loyalty letter. And I put everything I could in there to kind of, play my own chess game against myself.
For sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's super smart. We do the same thing. I love that. Very, very valuable information. Let's switch gears. We're running out of time, but fast forward to 2023, almost 2024. What are you up to today? And I know that you have a consulting thing going on. Talk us through that. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a wild ride. I did not expect that I would be involved in all these different things that I am now. So obviously, Natura Pest Control is kind of my main role, being on the ownership team there. And we're doing our best that we can to delegate and develop as much of those roles as possible. So, we've got a good management team on board there. And every year we kind of hand off another piece to them. That way they have opportunities, same that I had when I was kind of in their position. And then we've got the Bugbuxplus and Bugbuxplus opportunity. So Bugbucks started out as a podcast and a Facebook group, which you're part of, I'm sure.
Sure am. I remember the late night calls with Zuniga and all those guys at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. So, you've got the podcast, we've got the Facebook group, and then most recently we launched a leadership and development program, right? So it's an online learning program that you can send, owners to and upper level managers to, and even frontline colleagues to if you want. But it gives them a chance to learn from industry experts, and for low price, once a month, you get access to all these different courses, plus a new course that comes out each month. And then we also started partnering with vendors recently. And the goal there is so that we can get discounts and provide as much value as possible to the PCO. That way you come to Bugbucks, and from there, you can get training and development. You can go find a vendor that gives you an awesome resource for some product that you need or software or whatever that's going on. And then kind of on the side from there, I have my own consulting resource. And that's probably something that I'm going to end up phasing out as much as I can. I have some full-time clients that I work with. I'm very involved in their businesses and with their teams, and it's great. But I've had to kind of slowly step away from some of that stuff as these other opportunities have become available. So I still do consulting work on the side when I can, when I got the time, and I'm still pretty passionate about it. But I want to be able to provide the most value to the largest volume of people, and I think that's probably going to be through that Bugbuxplus learning and development platform.
Super awesome. What do the next 5 years look like for Natura Pest?
Ooh. I like every time I've made kind of a plan for the growth of Natura Pest Control, it always just surprises me what ends up happening, you know. But ultimately, what I would love to see happen is that we can provide as much opportunities as we can to kind of our upper level managers. You know, I do a leadership and development program internally with Natura right now, where we pick a book, we go through the book with a fine-tooth comb, we pick out all the leadership principles, right? And we sit down as a team and we talk about it. We say, hey, you know, like, what's good about this principle? You know, how can we integrate that into our lives, and how do we integrate that into our management styles, and then use it to benefit our business, right? And it was cool. The other day I was sitting in on one of these meetings and I was kind of talking and stuff, and it kind of dawned on me that, like, I'm not really leading these meetings anymore. Like, these meetings aren't for me, you know, they're for them, right? And even if I wasn't there, they would still be having these meetings, talking about these key principles and implementing them and developing without me. And I think for some leaders, that's kind of painful for a second, because you're like, oh man, like, what's my value, you know? But like, that's kind of the dream for me.
It is. I mean, that means we built it right.
Exactly, right? So in the next 5 years, where I want Natura to be is where we can start trusting more and more of our upper level management with these key roles and responsibilities in such a way that my involvement is actually kind of restrictive. You know, I would love to have a position where if I just take my hands off and let them handle it because they're passionate about it, because it's something that they take ownership over, that they'll kill it without me, right? And I'm sure I'm never going to step away fully, but the opportunity to give that person, you know, what I had early on, I think is what I'm really looking forward to. So obviously all the numbers are there, big growth, big profits, you know, gross profit, all the fun stuff. But realistically, the impact that we want to have is going to be for our people.
Super cool. Where do you think most business owners fail?
I think that most business owners fail in the development and delegation portion. You know, it's really difficult in the beginning where you build this thing from scratch, right? And you have all these personal relationships and you have all these systems and processes, hopefully. And everything that you do runs pretty smoothly because you do it, right? It's your own personal system. And then you get to this weird point where you need to grow. Like, that's the natural flow of it, but you really struggle bringing other people into the business because either you don't trust them, or you just can't get them to perform as well as you do. Or you worry about the impact that they're going to have on your brand that you just spent who knows how much of your time and life savings building. And so it's a really difficult move for you to make, is letting go of those high level things that you're doing and letting someone else have that opportunity, because it takes a lot of trust. It's risk, right? It's possibly more risk than starting the company in the first place. And so a lot of these business owners won't delegate, and they won't really allow their other people in the business to have those opportunities. And eventually they'll sit down at the end of the day and go, this isn't sustainable. I don't know what I can't do this anymore. Their marriage suffers, their personal life suffers, their health suffers. Their work-life balance is just totally gone, right? And then they think to themselves, the only way out of this is to sell. It's the only thing I can do. Or to sell my equity to someone else who can pull off those things, right? And so I think when you start as a business owner, if you have the idea of scalability in mind from the beginning, right? When what you're doing is in an effort to eventually delegate and develop and up level and pass the torch on to someone else, you're in a really good place, because you'll set up your business to be scalable. But if you don't set that up, or you don't have that in mind in the beginning, you will suffer in a lot of ways. And you'll find yourself in a really, really tough spot emotionally, physically, mentally, et cetera. And I think that's usually where most guys just can't handle it.
I agree with you there. I'll end with two questions. One, because you brought up books, what are your top 2 favorite books or favorite book in general?
Oh, so,
doesn't even have to be business,
dude. So it's funny that you brought up when you were talking about like early on, you didn't really read a lot of books. I could probably count on one hand the number of books that I had ever really like totally got into by the time that I was probably 25. It's just books. They didn't apply to me. I was like, whatever, dude, books are books. And then I started listening to books on Audible and reading books. And I remember one year where I think I did 100 books in a year. And that was a little bit too much. I'd prefer to do probably like no more than 1 book a week. That way you actually can absorb some of the material, and even a little bit less than that is fine. But I have read hundreds of books since then. And I always tell people like books are so wild to me. Somebody who goes through life and learns all these fantastic principles and philosophies and is successful in business and in their personal lives, that person spent hours detailing and writing down all their thoughts, all their pro tips, and they published it in a book. And you can read that for like $15 to $20. Seriously. Like some other professional person, you can have a professional mentor give you a book for $20. That's crazy to me, right? And so I tell people all the time, like, if you're not reading, you are missing out on a huge, huge opportunity to develop personally and professionally in your life, right? I think some of the books that I always come back to from just an overall mental health and professional kind of health perspective, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, so solid. I come back to that in so many professional conversations. It is probably my most commonly referred book. After that, 4 Disciplines of Execution is a fantastic goal-setting book. It helps you understand the difference between lead measures and lag measures and how to track performance. That's really, really good. Extreme Ownership is a phenomenal book. Dude, I could go down the list. It's
for sure.
There's so many good ones. But, if I could give just one piece of advice, it's, you don't have to read 50 books or 100 books a year to be successful. If you read 1 book a month, you can absolutely get a lot more than you've ever gotten before. And just, listen to it, take it in. I've reread a lot of books, lots of times. So reading is huge.
Yeah. And they always say knowledge is power. And I agree. But then I always say applied knowledge is power. So if you read the book, but don't do anything with it, it's useless.
Yes.
So take the nuggets, take some notes, take the nuggets. I take notes on every book that I read. Take the good nuggets that you want and go implement them. And then go move on to the next book. Last question of the day. What are you most proud of, Eric?
I'm really proud from a personal perspective. When I figured out, I think a lot of business entrepreneurs come from a place where they think it's all me, right? No one's coming to save me, burn my ships. I'm the only guy out here. I got to do it all on my own, kind of a thing. I think I'm most proud that at some point in my life, I realized that that's totally backwards than what it really is. And I actually had tons of opportunities given to me by other people that really allowed me to be the man that I am today. And I have a huge network of people now that I rely on personally, professionally. And so just knowing and understanding that it's not me, it's not just me, right? Not even close to being just me. Probably 90% of the advice that I give comes from books that I've read. It's my own little personal spin on it with my experience, but so much of the value that I bring to people, both professionally and personally, is because other people brought valuable things into my life, right? Those opportunities were given to me. And so now I'm trying to kind of do the same thing for people if I can, give other people opportunities and kind of pass that torch. And I've always kind of felt that wisdom is kind of like energy, right? It's not necessarily created or destroyed. It's just transferred, and if you can be the type of person who takes information and transfers value and wisdom to other people, you truly are contributing to the world being a better place. So the moment that I learned that, my life changed, and I'm just glad that I did, because I think a lot of people miss it.
That's incredible. Again, Eric, thanks for being here. You're an absolute stud, especially in our industry. Keep doing what you're doing, and I look forward to watching your journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonas, for having me, man. This has been great. I appreciate what you guys do, and it's been awesome being here.
Cool. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.